Hello there, and welcome to the Average Pundits podcast. I'm Reese, and hope you guys enjoy this week's very special edition of the Average Pundits podcast. We don't have Joe this week. Unfortunately, he feels a bit under the weather, but we have two very, very fulfilling guests with me. On my left, I have new Average Pundit guest, Alex.
Morning. Oh, afternoon.
And we have returnee Spurs fan, Sam.
Good afternoon.
So, how's everyone's week's been? You know, it's been a while since Sam's been on the podcast. Obviously, new addition to Alex.
Yeah, lots changed since the last come on.
Yeah,
Change your manager at Spurs.
change manager and new studio. We're currently sitting in a random studio, and I don't like it. The setup's weird. So, I feel like we should get underway with some Premier League results. Talk about the weekend just gone. Game week 16, I think. So, we are going to start with Southampton versus West Ham. Obviously, West Ham getting an away win against Southampton 1-0. Haller getting on the score sheet. He's hopefully starts to hit his form soon. West Ham, he hasn't really proved himself as a top signing for West Ham at the minute.
Nah, he started off quite well, and he started to go back downhill. I think it's just as West Ham crashed his form crashed as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a player in there, but I think he needs to start justifying the big price tag that they paid for him. But like I said, there is a player in there. They just need to utilise it. West Ham haven't been performing as well recently, so I think if they pick up, then Haller's form will pick up.
I mean, yeah, like you say, West Ham's form isn't really up to scratch, and it probably does show that with their marquee signing not really hitting the ground running as such. You know, West Ham are 15th in the table at the minute. They really need to start hitting some form if they don't want to be in that relegation battle at the end of the season. The next game that we're going to talk about, some would say maybe it was shocking with Villa's run of form as well. But then again, Sheffield United are actually, they are very, very good this season. They're 7th in the league, beating Aston Villa 2-0. John Fleck with the double. It was all a game for Lundstrom at this point. Lundstrom was all over the pitch in this game. He was fantastic.
Yeah, I think really missed a great chance as well with the penalty as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think watching the highlights, Villa, they kind of held out well for the first half. Second half, it was just completely Sheffield United. By the way, what Ollie Norwood is?
Yeah.
I think he's such an underrated footballer. I think he makes Sheffield United good at what they are. I think their midfield is just fantastic. I think it's a joy to watch. I really do.
He loves to run around the pitch, Norwood does.
Yeah.
He is their captain for a reason, and he's a personification of what the Sheffield United team is doing at the minute. An underdog story. You know, they're 7th in the league. They're above Wolves and Arsenal, who are both very big teams in their own right. Just behind, they're level on points with Manchester United as well. Sheffield United this season have just come out the gate. They've done what West Ham should have done. Basically, they've hit the ground running. They're taking it all in their stride.
It's a Championship squad that's outperformed itself massively. It shows what a great manager Chris Wilder is.
Just touching on Villa though, I think they actually you've seen their next 3 games: Watford, Southampton, and Norwich. If they win them 3 games, they look like pretty comfortable. But I think they need to be taking a minimum of 6 points from them.
I was going to say, if they take all 9 from them, then they are within the reach of Wolves, Arsenal, Crystal Palace. They're in that bracket of being able to come up to 25 points, and then they're out of that relegation battle.
It's going to make or break the season, really, isn't it?
If they lose all 3 of them, it could be curtains for Dean Smith, really.
Absolutely, yeah.
They've spent quite a bit of money in the summer. They've got some good quality players in the likes of Grealish, McGinn. There's a base of a good team there. They've got to be performing better than a relegation battle, I think.
But yeah, next game we were going to go on about the end of Leicester's winning streak actually. 1-1 versus Norwich. It was at the King Power Stadium as well. Tim Krul's own goal, but then Pukki opened the scoring for Norwich as well. So Pukki scored 3 and 4, in their last couple of games. So he's starting to again hit his form that he started at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, he started to find his beginning of the form season. But Vardy wasn't able to break his record though.
No,
It looked like he'd scored, but then
they gave it an own
Really
goal.
good result for Norwich, though.
Oh, absolutely. Norwich were fantastic in this game. You can't say that they. I mean, Leicester probably they had more of the possession, but I like to say that possession doesn't necessarily.
I
win
don't
football
think it
games.
was like a robbery by any stretch
No.
of the imagination, though.
I think Leicester didn't really deserve that win. I think that's the poorest that they've played this season. I reckon since that Man United loss.
I'm still not like. Sorry, I was just touching on Norwich again. I'm still not convinced that they are good enough to stay up, but they look like they've stringed some results together, so they look like they can make a bit of a fight of it.
They could make that relegation fight, and they might be able to get up to 18th or even 17th. They might be able to push out if like you say, if Aston Villa do lose these 3 games in a row. If Norwich are able to get points from Aston Villa.
They've got some decent players in it. Like that Campbell, I think, is a promising young player.
Yeah.
And Pookie, obviously, there's a chance that if he can fall in his form, they could get some goals that can see him get out.
Good goalkeeper as well,
Yeah.
Tim Krul. I know he scored an own goal, but there wasn't a fat lot he could do about it.
Yeah, Tim Krul is a very good goalkeeper, and I think he is showing that at the minute. But
he's keeping that Farman out of the team, and he was number 1 at Schalke for years in Germany.
I'm just going to say this. I'll edit this bit out. Would you mind lowering that a bit? So you keep coming in and out for some reason, and I'm not sure why.
Is that right now?
Yeah, it should be. Just turn it slightly. What number does that say? Yeah, mic 3. That's fine. It's just going a bit weird and in and out. Test it again.
Oh.
Yeah, it should be fine. Hopefully. Might want to just get a bit closer to it. But then again, I'll edit this bit out. Next game that we're going to talk about, Bournemouth, surprising victory against Chelsea.
Yeah, they seem like a bit of a bogey team for Chelsea, Bournemouth. They always have since they got promoted. And
Yeah.
really, I think a result that Eddie Howe actually really needed, to be quite honest with you, because Bournemouth looked like they were going down that slippery slope towards the relegation zone. But, it's starting to look quite testing for Lampard at Chelsea now. The honeymoon period, it looks like it's coming to an end. And they've got Tottenham at the weekend, if I'm right.
They've got Spurs at the weekend, and if Spurs win, we overtake them into 4th, meaning that since Jose's come in, Chelsea would have blown a 12-point lead in just 6 games.
He had to get that in, did you?
just had to. But yeah, Bournemouth. It was quite a good goal as well. That Gosling was able to slot it past.
Another VAR masterclass.
It was, yeah. VAR being a very controversial topic that it is, and we'll probably get to that more in another episode. But Ramsdale played a very big part.
Very good goalkeeper
in Bournemouth's win here.
I think he's got a shout of the Euro squad next year. Perhaps not starting, but in that squad.
Thing is,
going for the experience, I reckon.
We're talking of English goalkeepers. We've got so many to choose from at the minute. We've got Henderson, Pickford, Pope.
We don't need dinosaur arms now, do we?
We've even got Forster, who's doing really well up in Scotland as well.
I reckon we've got a very good choice of goalkeepers. Pickford's time might be drawing nearer to an end because he's not the greatest at Everton at the minute. They're 16th. If we want him to come in, and if we want to keep it to come in and do a job for us, we need someone that's been playing well day in, day out. In the Premier League, rather than just in tournament situation. I know he had a great World Cup.
I think he's one of them that throws playing for England. He's one of them that plays better for international than club level. Yeah,
like a Ramirez did. Yeah, when he was playing for Chelsea. He's just one of those players. Next up, we got Burnley against Newcastle.
Bit of a dull game.
What do you expect for 2 teams that just like to go out there and scrap? Burnley taking the sort of a cheap 1-0 win. The result that Sean Dyche needed. They're not really struggling. They're mid-table at the minute.
It was starting to go a bit slippery with obviously getting smashed 5-0 last week by Spurs.
Obviously, Newcastle's renaissance coming to a bit of an end, but I don't think many people expected this game to be a plethora of goals. I think you would have predicted a draw or 1-0 either way at most.
Absolutely, you don't really predict.
Still think 2 teams that will just be good enough to be clear of any sort of relegation. But no Saint Maximin for Newcastle, and that showed as well.
Yeah, no. You've Burnley coming off 3 losses in a row. and Newcastle also coming off an unbeaten run of 3 games. You sort of expected it to go the other way, maybe a goal from the defence. That's sort of the topic, that Newcastle are bringing at the minute. They can't really score with their attackers. Their attackers brought 1 goal within since they signed. Jolinton hasn't really hit the ground running at all. I hate to use that phrase.
Across that front three, they've got to about 2 goals between them.
Exactly.
One of them was against Spurs.
Yeah.
But both these teams have potential to stay up. They're currently.
I think they both will.
Relatively, respectively, they're sitting 11th and 12th at the minute. Newcastle are on the same points as Arsenal at the minute. So which says, I don't know which team that says a lot about whether it's Arsenal or Newcastle. They're doing both as good and bad as each other. But that'll tell.
Yeah.
Next game, a result that I wasn't necessarily pleased about it, because I was going into that game, expecting us to absolutely hammer them. But Liverpool beating Watford 2-0.
Yeah, I watched every kick of this game, and I thought Watford actually gave a very good account of themselves. And they look like they're going to make a fist of it under Nigel Pearson. He's the sort of manager that's going to install a fighting. He's a hard bloke. He's going to install a fighting mentality in Watford. They're going to go down with a fight. But touching on Liverpool, really important for them when they didn't play well to get the free, especially going into this, break where they're not going to be playing, where the other teams have the potential to catch up with them, and then Leicester away is the next game as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think we are living now in a scenario where I find it very hard that Liverpool don't win the league.
I think they've got to be very careful of Liverpool, because many performances like that against teams with more quality than Watford, you could get found out very quickly, because there was so many times in that game that Watford had chances to score, but just their lacking confidence in front of goal cost them that game, and it ultimately led to the downfall.
Liverpool had an off. Liverpool, you won 2-0 when you had an off day, and how many times in the last 2 years can we say Liverpool have had an off day?
Yeah.
So they don't come around often.
Yeah, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head there. I mean, we pretty much dominated the game, but then when we were in possession, we were nervous with the ball. And obviously, there was that time that Virgil van Dijk almost kicked it into his own net.
Yeah.
He passed it back to Alisson, and he just wasn't there. He moved off his line. So, a few shaky bits of that game.
Perhaps, a little bit of arrogance maybe on Liverpool's part, thinking they're going to turn up and palm Watford aside, and Watford, I think, might get this new manager bounce under Nigel Pearson.
Yeah, I thought that they played leaps and bounds better than what they have been doing, under Nigel Pearson right now. So, hopefully the momentum can. They've only got 9 points at the minute. I don't think Nigel Pearson wants to go down as having the Watford side that has the joint worst points tally of the Premier League history. So, next game, we're going to move on to Sunday's games now. Excuse me. We're going to move on to a Manchester United drawing against Everton. Now, Victor Lindelof's own goal was quite, unfortunate for him, because obviously VAR are coming in as well. Did you guys think it was a foul on De Gea?
I don't think personally, but I could see the arguments for why it was disallowed. I was shocked that it was given, because especially with VAR, it seems to reward defenders more than attackers. So I was shocked that they allowed it.
I think it's one of them that in another game it does get given, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
It all depends on what ref turns up on what day. Definitely.
But Mason Greenwood having to step up for Manchester United again, sort of that Manchester United figure.
They're starting to rely quite heavily on the youngsters, which is quite worrying for a team that has spent so much money over the past few years.
Yeah, exactly. They've spent a combined 300 to 400 million. Outrageous fees, but then someone to come through the academy, and providing goals.
Just before we move on, one major talking point from this game was the decision to sub on Moise Kean and then sub him pretty much straight back off. What did you make of that?
I personally think I understand why Duncan Ferguson did it, because if you watch how Moise Kean plays in that short cameo, it's for a team that was fighting for a point, or possibly 3, and to go out there and just perform like that. I can understand why he dragged him off, but it was still, it's a young kid in front of millions around the world, and you just hung him out to dry, and you've potentially just stalled his career even more.
Yeah,
as if it wasn't struggling enough at Everton.
It hasn't worked, has it, for Moise Kean at Everton? And I think, it could be one of them where he could, Ancelotti, an Italian coming in, could revitalise him, but if not, it looks like one of those that probably could end up, the loan being terminated or something like that.
No, this sounded.
Yeah,
I thought he was on loan.
Yeah,
Sorry.
It was permanent. Yeah,
but
he
it does at the minute scream a January 18-month loan or something like that, where he eventually just never plays for Everton again.
My bad. I thought he was on loan.
Goes to a French side or something, you know, like a Lyon, and it goes and tears it up. Comes back to Everton. I mean, it is hard to come to the Premier League and start, performing well. So for him to not get the chance to actually do that is quite, bad. Right. The next game we're going to talk about, Arsenal's thrashing, getting their behinds given to them by Manchester City. Kevin De Bruyne and Raheem Sterling scoring very early on. It just shows that the defence is not on par, not up to scratch at all.
I was going to say, some really good finishing by De Bruyne, but it was still just appalling from Arsenal. Once again, that defence is, honestly, it's a relegation sort of defence. It is absolutely atrocious.
I think, you know what, the negativity surrounding that football club at the minute, it's just, I could see them honestly finishing bottom half. I would put money on that. It's just embarrassing. You find it quite funny, obviously being a Tottenham fan,
it's
but
absolutely hilarious.
From a neutral point of view, this is the worst Arsenal team
Absolutely
I've ever seen in my lifetime, and I think it looks like Arteta is going to get the job, and I just can't get my head around it. I really can't.
It is puzzling. I mean, all the problems do point to that defence. I mean, you said Kolasinac got subbed off in the 40. Did he pull up with an injury?
Yeah, he was injured, so there was.
They
So they've
brought on
got
Saka.
Tierney injured as well. Kolasinac injured, so they left for majority of that game. A young.
I mean, they didn't concede for the rest of that.
Oh, that's because Manchester City didn't get out of.
It was like a training game for City in that second half.
It was like a training game in all aspects. There was barely anyone in the ground.
Yeah.
It was just. I think I saw a video of that railway bridge at the Emirates at half time, and literally so many people walking over it. It was just Man City just pratted about for the second half, really, and
that is, it's heartbreaking to see Arsenal, a club with such heritage, that's like. It's struggling. It's a dying club at the minute, and they need like a resurgence to come back and get rebuilt.
I think
the
they was
ground up.
hoping with Lundberg to get that Solskjaer bounce that United had last season, but he just hasn't worked out at all. It's been quite appalling.
He's had 4 games right now.
Yeah.
He's not.
Well, if you take the Europa League and the West Ham game, they didn't lose them games off the back of 10-minute spells where they looked all right.
Yeah.
So, they've been as bad as under Ljungberg than they were under Emery. They went to West Ham and won, but West Ham are on that dreadful run. I think anyone could go to West Ham and get a result.
Yeah.
And then, Standard Liège, where they got bullied for pretty much 90 minutes, and I don't know how they managed to get themselves back into that game.
I was going to say, I think Standard Liège needed like a 4-0 win to go through, and they went 2-0 up, and it was looking at one point, Arsenal could actually end up throwing it away, but obviously they've got enough quality going forward to get themselves out of that sort of hole.
You do think, where would they be without Aubameyang and Lacazette?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, they've got an aging Aubameyang right now, so like.
I think he will leave in the summer.
He has to.
Yeah.
They've got to can Ozil as soon as possible. As well. He needs.
I think that was Wenger's biggest mistake, giving Ozil so much money.
Yeah. I mean, giving Ozil money, and then he's just not gonna he's not gonna leave. So for them to have done, I like you say, it's a massive mistake from Wenger. Final game on the Sunday, a game that probably Sam is very keen to talk about. Jan Vertonghen's late winner against Wolverhampton. What a goal from Adama Traore, though.
Yeah,
that was a stunning strike.
There's a couple of good. I thought the goals were quite good. Like Lucas
Lucas
Moura's
Moura he danced around that Wolves
dancing
defence.
around the Wolves
like a
defence, just
samba.
manages to find the smallest space in the near post and smashes it in.
I'll let Sam touch on the Spurs perspective. I think that's only fair. I'll talk about Wolves, and I thought how well they played. I know they didn't get the result.
Yeah, I thought that they played really, for the large majority of that game. Jan Vertonghen was really struggling at left back against Adama Traore, as I'd imagine most defenders are this season.
One player I would like to touch upon is definitely Adama Traore.
What a player!
I think now he has got that end product in his game, and I think he could leave Wolves and go into another top six. Well, would you call Wolves a top six side?
I think I think Wolves are one or two big signings, a defensive signing, and maybe another midfield player away from Champions League football.
I think Wolves could. Adama Traore could definitely go into like a Chelsea.
Yeah, I think that'd be harmful for his career.
I think he found his right spot at Wolves.
Yeah, you look at the Wolves side, and they're building around this young core of players. They got Ruben Neves, Adama Traore, Jota as well,
and Raul Jimenez. They've got some it's a really strong squad. And I personally believe for Wolves, they're a dark horse for the Europa League.
Absolutely, I reckon they are getting far
because they've got that sort of setup.
They're such a pleasure to watch as well. I thought every game you don't watch a game with Wolves and it's boring.
Exactly.
I just think they're such a good. And then Adama, I've always said if he finds a bit of end product, you could have a player on your hands. He's found that end product, and what a player! And he's getting in the Spain squad now, so that says all that you need to say.
Yeah, he's found his place. He's constantly improving on his end product.
But for Spurs, I think that was like your archetype of Jose performance, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was perhaps a few times this season where we'd struggled to get that result on the patch, but Jose.
I mean, you probably wouldn't have got it on the patch.
There was a few times, usually like typical Spurs mentality. You could see that equaliser, you're thinking, "Oh God, when's that winner coming?" Gazaniga comes up with a big save at 1-1.
Yeah, that was a good save as well.
Obviously, from the last minute corner, Christian Eriksen has been taking horrendous corners over his time. Manages to pick a free Jan Vertonghen at that post, nods it in.
Eriksen and Vertonghen linking up.
Probably the one criticism of Wolves for me was their defence was all at sea for that goal.
The marking for that corner was abysmal. I have no idea where their defenders were. I mean, they're playing Romain Says at centre back at the minute. And I'm pretty sure he's a midfielder along with Dendoncker as well. Yeah. They're both midfielders. They're leaving Connor Cody, to captain two midfielders to play defence. Yeah. I mean that it's a credit to them that they only managed to concede two against Spurs. I mean, Lucas Moura, that goal was fantastic, to be honest. Probably one of the goals of the weekend, barring one of the Kevin De Bruyne ones. Yeah. And maybe that Adama Traore goal as well. But for this Wolves, I think they are one big defensive signing away from maybe getting that big spot in the Champions League. Maybe that fourth spot.
But I think that was a big 3 points for Spurs because it means that we go into that Chelsea game next week.
Yeah.
3 points behind.
I'm really looking forward to that game.
A better goal difference. It should be a really exciting game. Jose's first game against Chelsea.
They're always good games between Spurs and Chelsea as well. You obviously got the Hazard one that won Leicester the league. You've got the one.
Bridge.
You got the one at Wembley the other season as well. They're always good watches. Chelsea v Spurs. I'm really looking forward to just sitting down and watching that game.
Yeah, it's going to be a very good fun game, especially with the result that it could potentially get. Spurs, they were mid-table. At the beginning of at the end of Poch's reign. Jose's picked him up, and he could take him into Champions League qualification. It just shows that is the type of manager that Jose Mourinho is. He's absolutely fantastic as a manager. I doubted him at Manchester United, but maybe that period of Jose Mourinho is still yet to come. Next game, there's not really much to talk about here. Wilfried Zaha and Mopai scoring both for Crystal Palace.
There is one thing I would like to say actually, and I think it's going under the radar of how good of a job Roy Hodgson's actually doing.
Yeah.
You look at Palace's squad last night, and it was threadbare. They had to start Riedewald, who hadn't started a game in over a year at left back. And I know a 1-1 draw at home to Brighton doesn't seem a great result, but Roy Hodgson's made Crystal Palace hard to beat, and I just think they're not. Crystal Palace are not going to go down, and with a bit of investment, I think they could potentially push for Europa League qualification. That's a bit of a bold shout from me, I know.
I mean, they're ninth at the minute. They are at the moment 3 points away from Spurs, depending on the results from the next game. If Chelsea do beat Spurs and Crystal Palace,
they've got Newcastle on Saturday, so
they beat Newcastle, they're on the same points as Tottenham Hotspur at that point. They could be either a place
very close
behind.
in that little area, isn't it? There's a lot of teams who are just points away from
Yeah.
So I just wanted to point out, big up Roy Hodgson.
Yeah, I was saying this in a Weatherspoons in the summer. Roy Hodgson's a good manager.
Roy Hodgson is a good manager at clubs like, and this is not me trying to put them down. Clubs like Blackburn, Fulham,
Yeah.
Crystal Palace.
He's not good at big teams.
No, the England job and the Liverpool job, they were too big for him. And also Brighton as well. I think Graham Potter's doing it was a bit of a risk to get rid of Chris Hughton. They took that risk. I was actually one who was quite critical of getting rid of Chris Hughton. But Graham Potter now, he looks like he's doing a good job. And again, I can't see Brighton being in any real danger, to be quite honest.
No, again, like they're 13th right now.
That Neil Maupay as well, that looks like a really good signing.
Oh yeah, honestly,
He seems to be scoring a lot of goals.
Yeah.
Hard team to beat as well. Not many teams go to the Amex and play Brighton off the park.
Exactly. So yeah, that is your weekly roundup of the Premier League this week. We shall have a graphic from mine and Mr. Brody, who unfortunately is not here.
He's bottled it.
He has bottled it. He's a bit under the weather right now. So yeah, they will be going up on our social medias, on Instagram at Pundits Average and Twitter at Pundits Average. It's backwards because Twitter doesn't like me. Anyway, moving on to my favourite segment, guys. It's the hype train. So for those listening who don't know what the hype train is, we sort some players that have been suggested to us onto a carriage of this hype train. So the first one is poor, then average, prospect, star player, and world class. There's a few players up for debate today that could go absolutely anywhere. The first player I'd like to offer from our Instagram suggestions, Richarlison.
I think it might be a controversial one, but I'll put him as star player for Everton.
He is their star player at the minute.
I think he's one that could. They'd be very happy that he's signed a new contract, because I think there's a lot of teams that would look at him and say, if he's scoring goals in a team that's struggling as much as Everton have done while he's been there, imagine what he could do in a team that's not struggling.
Sorry, what are the 5 brackets again?
So you got poor,
He's not poor.
average,
He's not average.
prospect.
I'd probably say prospect for Richarlison. He's
Okay.
still relatively young, isn't he?
Yeah,
So I've got a deciding vote here. He is a very good player. I mean, he is still young, like you say.
I still think there's more to come from him.
I do think there's a lot of it, like that he needs to build on a lot. Like he needs to build on his attitude a bit, maybe mature a bit as a player.
I think
But
there's
then-
also that Theo Walcott argument of, is he a winger or is he a striker? Because there have been a few times where he's gone up front, and then there's times when he's looked better coming from the wide. Which is what Walcott struggled with in his early part of his career. Is like, did he want to play in the wing or up front? Which is what I think stalled him quite a bit.
Yeah, I do think that he needs to find out where he's going. So
I think what you had with Richarlison as well, they spent a lot of money on him, and I think that was kind of weighing down his confidence.
Exactly, yeah.
There was a lot of weight on his shoulders, but now I think he's starting to get into his stride. I'd still class him as a prospect for the time being. Come back to me at the end of the season.
yeah, I was going to say we are going to have a massive rejig of the hype train and big episode at the end to see where we should put all the players. The next player I have for you guys, Riyad Mahrez.
I think that's definitely a star player.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You can't really argue with that. Riyad Mahrez is absolutely brilliant at this point in his career. He's brilliant for Leicester, and he was a bit shaky at the start of his Manchester City career.
We've got a few big goals for him last season.
Yeah, I mean he was quite close for the. Well, I mean not quite. He was in like top 20s for the Ballon d'Or nominations. So
Goes under the radar how good Riyad Mahrez actually is.
he is.
I was going to say he was crucial in Algeria winning the African Cup of Nations in the summer.
He is one of those players.
I think it's because he plays for Manchester City now. It kind of just he's not a star player for Man. You wouldn't say he's a Man City star player,
No.
would you? But he is a star player individually. He's that good.
Put him in any other team in the Premier League bar Liverpool, he'd be the star player.
Oh, without a shadow
Put him in
of a
the
doubt.
Chelsea team, put him in that United team.
And I think that says a lot about how good Manchester City and Liverpool are.
Absolutely, they are at the minute they're a class above everyone else. I wouldn't take Riyad Mahrez in our squad. That's for sure. Maybe unless we were to move him into the centre and put him into a central attacking midfielder role, like the creative playmaker of our team, just behind Firmino. I think that'd be where we'd put him if we were to have him. But again, no, it wouldn't be the star. He'd be the guy that makes the goals rather than scores them. Oh yeah, that's our hype train segment. So we're going to move on to a very interesting topic that you might see by obviously the thumbnail and the title. We're coming to the end of the decade, guys. Are we feeling old?
Very.
I know I am.
I'm out of my prime.
I think we've all been out of our prime for some time, lads. So
We left the club at 2 last night.
Yeah.
That's definitely out of prime. Too old.
I mean, I leave at 1, so I'm way past it. I'm nearly 21. Now, this is horrible. So we're gonna go through each Premier League team currently in the Premier League and see where they were at the beginning of the decade, in the 2009 to 2010 season, where they finished in 2010. So I guess we start with Liverpool. You know, they're top of the league at the minute. I'm pretty sure
It was
Rafa's last season, yeah. So
and that was like the start of the decline for Liverpool, wasn't it? That was, you dropped out the Champions League that season. I think that was the season Spurs.
Yeah.
Because for years in the Premier League, your top 4 was every season Chelsea, Manchester United, Arsenal, Liverpool, and Spurs come in and broke the mould, dislodged Liverpool from the top 4. Rafa left, and then Roy Hodgson.
A few years of much pain for Liverpool.
absolutely,
They were the dark days, Roy Hodgson.
for each team, I'm going to give a prediction of where they finished. Whereabouts do you think Liverpool finished that season?
In the 09-10 season,
Yeah,
they, if I'm right, were in Europe the season after under Roy Hodgson. Did they finish 5th? No, 6th. I'm going to go 6th.
Sam?
7th.
Sam got it correct. They finished 7th. So they finished behind another team. So yeah, this was the decline. They finished 7th. They won 18 games, drew 9, and lost 11. This was a real heavy decline for Liverpool. This was a very dark period. Obviously, Manchester City, who we're going to move on to next, it was the start, almost
That was when they got the money.
splashing the cash everywhere.
The 09-10 season was, if I'm right, the season they signed Adebayor, Tevez.
Yeah, it was the first, because the season before it was spent money, but not on big name players. But that was
they had
they
Robinho.
bought in the big players.
Yeah, they bought, like you said, Tevez and Adebayor. So where do you think Manchester City finished in the 09-10 season?
They finished 5th, just behind Tottenham.
Finished
did.
5th because they lost to Tottenham Hotspur at the Etihad.
Yeah, they
Peter
did.
Crouch winner.
I mean, Manchester City, they did well, seeing as where they came from. Basically, the beginning of the decade, this decade, arguably you could say Manchester City had this
This has
decade.
been- Every team has that decade, which is their prominent one. And this
What I
is
find absolutely crazy, though, you look at that, and was it Mark Hughes who was Manchester City manager
Yeah.
at the start of the decade? No,
Yeah.
they got Pep Guardiola. It's just
It is crazy. Maybe that's going to happen to, Charlton Athletic in the Championship right now. Are they going to have that meteoric rise because they've just got the richest owners? They are now the richest team, apparently. They've got the richest owners in the world.
Have they been bought out now?
They've been bought out. So I'm pretty sure I'm not sure if it's related to Sheikh Mansour, but it was the team that tried to buy Manchester United and Newcastle as well. So he was looking for a club, and he's finally found it. So maybe we'll, at the end of this decade, we're going to talk about the decade being about Charlton Athletic.
what I will say, though. You say Manchester City had this decade, but I certainly think they could have won more.
Yeah, there's
Because they had them seasons and them under Mancini. Was it the season after they won the league where Manchester United?
It was that typical. They had 2 seasons. The Pellegrini, other than his first season, was a massive flop in my opinion, and obviously Mancini after the title win and the Wigan Cup final loss.
And Pep's first season was, I think that was a bit of a transitional.
Yeah.
So next team we're going to go on about Leicester City. So they are currently, they're currently second in the Premier League table. Where do you think these guys were? 10 years
Leicester in the 09-10 season, they lost in the playoffs in the Championship to Cardiff City. I remember that because these are the heady days when my team, Coventry City, used to have a massive rivalry with Leicester, and obviously the two teams have just,
ago? Yeah.
If there's
And,
ever a rivalry that went one way, it
yeah, it definitely. And I used to dread playing Leicester, to be quite honest, because we always used to lose to them. But I remember they lost to Cardiff in the playoff semi-finals in the Championship that season.
Yeah, they were in the Championship, but what place do you reckon they finished?
They finished 6th, I'm going to say.
I'm gonna say 5th.
Sam's nailing him on the head today. He's on a roll.
Mystic Sam as well.
5th under it was under Nigel Pearson as well. So Nigel Pearson bringing them
That's
up
one club
eventually.
that's had arguably the biggest change. Wow.
Yeah.
And Andy King is still there.
How with this time has Andy King been able to stay at Zach for such a long time? So next we have 4th place Chelsea. Where were they in the 2009-2010
Arguably,
season?
that's a team.
They won the league.
They won the league.
Yeah,
But that is arguably a team that has, alongside Arsenal, might be potentially the biggest decline. When you compare it to the start of the decade, they was winning Premier Leagues, fighting for Champions Leagues. Obviously, they won a couple more.
But they still won 3 Premier League titles this decade.
But then, following that last title win, it's been seriously downhill for Chelsea. Like
Yeah.
I think their ambitions have changed because you think of over the years, Chelsea were always like one of the teams you'd say, but now you're like, oh, they'll get top 4. That shows that perhaps Abramovich is losing interest in it.
I think that's just, I think Manchester City are what Chelsea were.
Yeah.
Manchester City are Chelsea of the 2000s now. And I just think, Abramovich is obviously a really rich bloke, but I just don't think he can compete with Manchester City. I think...
Go on.
Yeah, I just think, and then Liverpool, I'd probably say they're not as rich as Chelsea, but they've spent it wisely. Chelsea have spent a lot of money on, you could argue flops.
Yeah, they've had whereas like Liverpool's recent signings have all been very good, but Chelsea have a amazing history of just flop after flop after
Flop strikers is their
Yeah.
main motto. Since Drogba, they haven't been able to bring in a good striker.
Chelsea are one of those clubs where it's, from the outside looking in, it's ran like a bit of a shambles, but they always manage to get by. They get through managers.
but it works for them.
But they just don't suit longevity.
No.
So we're going to go for Tottenham Hotspur next. They're in
I'll
5th
let,
at the
I'll
minute.
let you talk about this one, Sam.
Yeah, it's been a
And,
bit of a weird decade. There's been
I mean, you lost Marquis signing Gareth Bale as well.
there was obviously on the Redknapp there was many highs that qualified for the Champions League that we did that season for the first time in
Yeah.
I think it was like 50 years.
So yeah, that
But
was
it was
great season.
a massive achievement, and the run that was great. And then obviously we spent years out of it, and then Poch came in. That was when it all changed around for the best.
It started very very high for Spurs, and then it went down, and now we're on and up again.
I
Well,
was gonna say it was
up,
after
down, and then
it was like
going up
down for the AVB Sherwood. And
Yeah.
Poch come in, found all these gems in Kane, your Dele Allis.
yeah,
Managed to get the best out of Eriksen, sign his son.
absolutely, yeah.
The
it's him with
Belgian
Son.
centre backs.
What it says about Spurs, though, is how much they've changed of a club, is that, just finishing 4th at the start of the decade was seen as like this massive achievement for
Yeah.
them, which it was.
It was
And now, it's just, if they don't finish in the top 4, it's a bit of a shock.
that first run, that first time in the Champions League, it was like, oh, we're here. Whereas
Yeah.
now it's we want to compete. Like obviously reaching the final in Madrid last season.
Did you reach the final in Madrid? You never mentioned it.
That
I
was,
don't know what happened after that. Ooh. I remember a
football
penalty.
ended on the 8th of May that year. After Lucas Moura scored, there was no football played again that season.
Oh, if only it had gone the other way. I think we'd be making jokes the other way. I'd be absolutely in tears right now if that had gone the other way. But all I remember is there was a penalty, and that was it.
It was never a pen.
So that's another argument for another day.
So a team that are arguably had one of the worst downs ever. Manchester United.
It was just
Yeah, they finished
that
second.
post-Fergie.
They finished second in 09-10.
Yeah.
Post-Fergie, it's been a disaster.
Yes, arguably, yeah. Since Fergie departed,
There's
it's
a few
been a
high
shambles.
points of obviously winning the FA Cup with Van Gaal, Mourinho's treble,
Yeah, the Europa League.
League Cup and Community Shield.
It's not been pretty for Manchester United over this past. Obviously, they've found a lot of gems, and they've spent a lot of money. They brought back Paul Pogba. They found Marcus Rashford, and all these young players. They signed Martial back in 2016 as well. So it's been a weird season.
What I will say,
a weird decade for them.
what I will say about Manchester United is, for me, the warning signs were actually there at the start of the decade. You know, they lost the title to Chelsea in 09-10. They then won the next one, then
Lost it
again to Manchester City, and I think they blew like an 8-point lead to Manchester City.
Yeah.
And I think that season, the 11-12 season, the Aguero season, was the original season that Ferguson planned to leave.
Yeah.
And then they lost the title in such a fashion that was, unheard of for Manchester United. Ferguson did not want to retire on that. He then extended for another season, and that, I will say, is one of the poorest Premier League winning squads going.
Yeah,
The 12-13 Man United one, and I think that says a lot about Ferguson, how good of a manager he was, that he managed to actually win the league. With
absolutely.
yeah, it was a bit of a boring season, that one,
Yeah.
because Manchester United steamrolled the title without actually being good.
exactly. Yeah, they didn't have a very good side at that point, did they?
No.
It was
Aging
absolutely
Van Persie now, aging Rooney,
exactly.
aging Fernando Vidic, Evra,
It wasn't a
young De
great side.
Gea.
Exactly, a young De Gea that's just come off.
But yeah, I think for Manchester United, I actually can't see him getting back to where they were under Ferguson for a long time, because that says a lot about how good Alex Ferguson
But
was.
my big argument with Man United is they've only ever had two really successful periods under both Matt Busby and Fergie.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I could.
Spatter in the works there.
I mean, they haven't had another successful manager other than those two, have they?
No, there's
Like
not
that.
really been any that have.
So, from Manchester United, we move on to a club that probably we didn't expect to be talking about probably at the beginning of the decade, Sheffield United.
They
We're down in League One, I believe. Then
no. I
Champions.
think obviously we were in the same league as Sheffield United then, and I think 09-10 they didn't. I think they just finished mid-table in the Championship, and I think they actually got relegated the season after. But again, obviously, I'm going to talk about this for a while, because being a Coventry fan, we played Sheffield United a lot in League One, and they were always that club that shouldn't be in League One. They were too big for it, and they just couldn't get out. They had Nigel Atkins in the 15-16 season, and they were horrendous. I think they finished bottom half, and then they appointed Wilder, and haven't looked back. What a job he has done. He is an absolutely fantastic manager. Without a doubt, he is that club, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
there's a lot of players there's actually quite a few players in that Sheffield United squad that were playing for him down in League One, and it shows the job that Chris Wilder's done to bring them up from League One to the Championship, which you could have argued this might be a step up too much, and to go up from automatically last season in the Championship, and then to not just everyone was like, oh, Sheffield United, they're guaranteed down, and they've came up and just exceeded everyone's expectations. I think even Sheffield United fans' expectations.
Yeah, honestly.
What I like about them is everybody writes them off. Even in the Championship, everyone was like, yeah, it won't last. They won't go up. They're not good enough to go up. Then they got up and it was like, yeah, they'll get a few good results, but they'll go down. And I think Sheffield United, now the start they've had, the results they've got, it's given them that much of a platform. I find it very hard to envisage, even if they go on a bad run, Sheffield United being in any sort of trouble.
Exactly. I mean, at the minute, they're in that point where they are in potential of finishing a Europa League spot. Whether it will last, to next season, or will it last past Christmas, no one knows. But obviously, they're in a good run of form at the minute. Who knows where it's going to go? So, the next team I'm going to bring to you, a team that's actually had a really weird decade as well, Wolverhampton Wanderers.
Wolves were in the Premier League in the 09-10
That was their
season.
first season, first back. They obviously went down in 2012, embarrassingly bad that season,
Yeah.
and of course had that drop down into League One, which if you said to a Wolves fan they dropped down to League One where they've been now, they would have laughed at you.
Yeah. If you'd have said to a Wolves fan at the beginning of the decade that they would be 8th place, probably fighting for Europa League football by the end of the season.
Playing European football as it is already.
Exactly.
Into the knockout to the European football.
If you said to them they would have a former Champions League captain, like a captain from the Champions League,
yeah,
they'd laugh at you. They've got Portugal's number 1 keeper. They've got a Portuguese midfielder that's been that's got like some of the most career caps for the country.
Yeah. There's some absolute.
They've got one of the most promising players in Adama Traore in the Premier League at the minute. Absolutely brilliant. Like their season's gone, like their decade has gone from right down here, and they're living their life right now. They are on a roll. They're hitting the form of the best form that they've hit.
Yeah.
But who knows where this Wolves side? Like I say, they are 1 or 2, maybe 3 signings off, like a big signing, like a creative midfielder.
Yeah.
Off, maybe pushing for that Champions League place, and then full rebuild from there. They could do a Leicester at this point. I do think
It's very possible they could do.
so. They were in the Premier League. They were 15th. So the next team, Crystal Palace.
Crystal Palace, I remember this, stayed up on the last day of the 09-10 season I think they went to Sheffield Wednesday away, and I think the winner of that game stayed up, and the club was in like crippling financial state at the time, and then that's when Steve Parish come in and took over, and they managed to get up under Ian Holloway, and then you fought in that 13-14 season when Crystal Palace were in the Premier League. They looked dead and buried. Pulis come in, kept them up. Obviously he left, but since then Crystal Palace haven't really looked like going down at any point. And I think they're now an established Premier League club and a well-run club that spend within their means but manage to stay up. And yeah, I think, like I say, what a job Hodgson's done, and his predecessor before that, Pardew. He got onto an FA Cup final. Obviously, it ran its course.
I don't think I can disagree with anything that you've just said there. They are one of those clubs now. They were what Sunderland were for so many years, and what Newcastle were for so many years. They are that staple club that are finishing mid-table. Heartbreak when
they just won't ever. They don't ever seem to be in real trouble of going down.
Like heartbreak when I think about Cristamble. The game that we threw away. To not win the league at that point.
A team as well, Crystal Palace, that I don't think many of the top sides enjoy playing.
No, I have always said that Crystal Palace are our bogey team. Crystal Palace are Liverpool's bogey team. Like, no one enjoys playing them. They used to, obviously, last season they had Wan-Bissaka. He was an absolutely outstanding player for them. They've obviously got Wilfred Zaha, who almost started the decade at Manchester United. I'm pretty sure he went to Manchester United about 2012. Went back to Crystal Palace to play throughout this decade. So it just shows the importance that Wilfred Zaha has put across to Crystal Palace.
Can I just ask, was it right? Did Palace stay up on the last day of the season?
They did.
Yeah,
they did. They finished 21st. Then they drew 2-2 with Sheffield Wednesday. No, he's got his championship knowledge today. He's got his championship hat on.
If you want to do a championship episode, I could go for hours.
So, one of the next teams we got is Arsenal.
That's a team that's had a disastrous.
Probably the worst, could you argue?
I mean, where they are now compared to where they were, absolutely. But they're 10th now. Where did they finish in the 2009-2010 season?
Fourth, fifth, third or fourth.
Yeah, just ahead of Spurs. Well, not just. They were 5 points ahead of Spurs, but one place in front of Spurs.
Honestly, we could be talking about this lot for half an hour. Really, they've had an absolutely dreadful.
Absolutely, yeah. There's not a lot you can say other than it's just gone down.
The one season, I think, you look at for Arsenal. You look at well, in fact, no, there's two. The 13-14 season where they were top at Christmas.
Yeah.
And
They just collapsed.
They then scraped the top four, which, again, that's just Arsenal. And then the 15-16 season, the Leicester season, where everybody says that Tottenham threw away the league. I would say it was Arsenal who threw the league away more. That they were the only team to actually. They did the double on Leicester that season, didn't they? Like I said, Arsenal should have won the league that season. They didn't. Arsenal mentality just drop off. So they've come out of this decade with three FA Cups, 2 FA Cups. Yeah, it's been a disaster.
Arsenal are one of those clubs that you thought were gonna maybe win another Premier League this decade. Like you just thought it. They're a massive club. You thought Wenger would have at least wanted one more before.
It's like if you think to when they finished the season unbeaten, they played Leicester on that last day, and Leicester went down. If you were to say to any fan who'd in that ground that day who'd be the next team to win the Premier League, if you'd said Leicester are going to be the next team in that game to win the Premier League, they would have been just laughed at.
Yeah, and the whole stadium would have been absolutely just up in a roar of laughter. I'm gonna throw some very interesting teams right now that are currently in the Premier League, because there are a lot of teams that aren't currently in the Premier League. So there are 2 more, I believe. No, 2 or 3 more teams that were in the Premier League. So I'm gonna go for Everton. Where were they? Where did they finish the 2009-2010 season?
Is it 8th?
Yeah, around that.
Yeah, they finished bang on 8th.
It was like your generic Moyes season. They didn't really do anything.
Yeah.
It was just there.
Everton is such a weird team.
Yeah, they
They're
were
just-
this decade.
It's like what can you say about Everton?
They've
Like,
had some high they've had some high points, obviously. First Martinez season when they just about missed out on Champions League in that 13-14.
I don't actually know what to say about them, because they want to break into this top 6, but it just seems like the amount, no matter how much money they throw at it, they're never going to do it. They've wasted. Remember that season they had Koeman, and they wasted God knows how many million on number 10s, Klassen, Rooney, Sigurdsson. Everton, I don't even know what to say. They're just a bit of a.
I mean, that season saw, Everton having Louis Saha and he's scoring 13 goals. Louis Saha was still a big player then. Coming off from Manchester United going to Everton. And then throughout the decade they've just got those goal scorers, and I think they got to a point after they sold Lukaku. They've not recovered. They tried to get Cech Tosun, Moise Keane has seemed to be that replacement, but he hasn't had any game time. They don't bring him on. Like, what's the point of?
Well, they bring him on and take him back off.
Exactly. They don't give time to a player that they've spent £30 million on.
No, I think Everton as well. They'd have probably wanted a trophy this decade.
Yeah,
like a cup, and they haven't managed to do that. So they've had a bit of I would call it a bad decade, Everton.
Yeah,
for what they want to do.
If we were rating decades, it's
obviously they had the
Everton's had a very poor
takeover
one.
from Mashiri, and they wanted to break into that top 6, and they just haven't done it, and they haven't come close.
Speaking of takeovers, a team that were taken over this decade and wanted to challenge for Champions League football, it was West Ham United.
Did they get relegated in the 9-10 season?
It was the season after.
Or the season after? Yeah. Again, another really weird decade for West Ham. I think they were that. They lost their biggest asset, West Ham, this decade, which was their stadium.
Yeah.
It was such an intimidating place to go. I don't think anyone enjoyed going to Upton Park as a visiting team. They moved to the London Stadium. They did go down at some. Yeah, they went down.
Yeah, they went down 10-11.
Yeah.
Got themselves up through the playoffs. Had Sam Allardyce, and then Allardyce kind of just established them back in the Premier League. And then they wanted to push on from Sam Allardyce. They appointed Bilic. And for that season, the last season at Upton Park, West Ham were fantastic. I thought
They were pushing for Champions League football.
Bilic had them playing some really good football. Obviously,
Dimitri Payet was absolute. He was so good. It was so fun to watch Dimitri Payet that season.
But yeah, West Ham again. I think they're a bit like Everton. They'd have probably wanted a trophy,
Yeah.
and for what they want to achieve, they haven't done it. So I'd say it's been a bit of a bad decade
I
for
think
West
after
Ham.
they left Upton Park, it's just been absolutely atrocious.
Yeah, it
It's
has.
been so poorly run.
You know, Upton Park was one of those places. It's like a historic ground. Like, none of the fans wanted to leave that place, and I remember like watching a video of like some of the fans taking the seats that they've like sat in for the past like 5-10 years. Like they've had the season ticket and sat in the exact same seat at Upton Park, and it just shows what that ground meant to the fans.
Yeah.
Like the atmosphere that was always there.
I don't
horrible.
I don't suppose if you've been to the London Stadium. I've been, and it is not a football ground. It's not. It's not a nice place to watch football.
No, it's not. And the final team I'm going to say from the 2009-2010 season, Aston Villa.
It's been after that season when
that was when it started to go wrong for Aston Villa at the start of this decade.
They had a good season that season. They were pushing for the European places.
That was O'Neill's last season, the 09-10.
And then O'Neill left, and since then it's just been really downhill. Picked up last season under Dean Smith, and finally got back into the Premier League.
I forgot how good Aston Villa were at this point. Where do you reckon they finished?
They finished sixth.
They finished sixth.
And yeah, Aston Villa, they were again, probably one of the best teams outside the top four at the start of the decade. But then, when O'Neill left, you got the feeling that Aston Villa being relegated was sort of inevitable.
Yeah.
There were so many times they just stayed up by the skin of their teeth.
Yeah.
Christian Benteke kept them up for 3 seasons, really, didn't he?
Yeah.
Was it 2 or 3?
Yeah.
Once you get rid of the players, Bonner just stopped wanting to play football. They got rid of John Carew, James Milner, and Ashley Young both dipped off. Stuart Downing also left for Liverpool as well.
Barry. There was so
Fabian Delph.
A really strong team at the start of the decade, and then it just all.
I think it was this season that Gareth Barry went to Aston Villa.
Yeah.
Went to Man City. Sorry. So at this point as well, they still had Emil Heskey, who scored 3 goals that season.
And then they had that disaster of a summer where they lost Benteke, lost Delph.
Yeah, they lost they lost everything. They just didn't get it back, which inevitably.
But credit to Dean
down.
Smith, he got them back where they feel they belong, and
they're back in the Premier League. They are a staple of Premier League football at this point, and I mean they're not really showing it with their form. They're currently 17.
They could easily go down. Don't get me wrong. I don't think they will. I think they've just got enough. But like I said, it's been another team where it's been a really.
Can we have one team
weird.
that has had a disastrous of a decade from that season? Go on. I'm sure Alex will enjoy this. Sunderland.
Oh, Sunderland!
That's
yeah.
a team that has had
I was gonna list off those teams that aren't currently in the Premier League. So we can start with Sunderland. They have
Sunderland team. It was a very good team.
That was the season they had Steve Bruce, wasn't it?
They had Darren Bent scoring. Obviously, that infamous beach ball
the
goal.
Beach ball goal. Oh, it haunts me in my dreams.
So you think about that Sunderland team. If you used to tell them, any Sunderland fan at the end of the season, they had a really good team, looking good. If you're going to say to them, at the end of this decade, you will be mid-table in League One, looking like you're not even going to make the playoffs.
Been
a horrendously run.
Horrible.
Again, how I said with Aston Villa, you got the feeling that they were sleepwalking to relegation. It was inevitably going to happen. You did get that impression with Sunderland.
There were so many times they just stayed up on the last day or stuff. Like that.
I mean they had they've had some very weird players as well. Controversially Adam Johnson as well.
Yeah,
Ched Evans.
I think as soon as they lost Sam Allardyce to the England job, you thought that was Sunderland's time, and then it's gone from like one disaster to another, and now they're sat in mid-table, which is a massive shame. My heart really does go out to them. It really does.
They finished mid-table that season, and now they're finishing mid-table 2 divisions down. So it's quite hard. Another team that aren't currently in the Premier League, but they finished mid-table as well. Birmingham City, they finished 9th that season. And
then obviously the following season, they had the ultimate high of winning the Carling Cup.
Yeah, the first relegated team to win it.
Yeah, something like that.
Obafemi Martin's coming in.
A team that shouldn't have gone down, in my opinion. A team that was too good to go down.
Yeah.
Not too good to go down, but
yeah,
a team that shouldn't have gone down, in my opinion.
And then
they haven't recovered since.
Obviously, they had players on astronomical wages. They got relegated.
Yeah,
couldn't afford it.
Nikola Zigic was one of those players that just. Yeah, he wasn't up to standard.
They just had relegation scrap after relegation scrap. It's a miracle how they've managed to.
It looked like Blues at some point were going to go into League One.
They were going to go into administration.
Yeah. And then, But the season they had, they were really good. They were really good. They were really good that season, if I remember
They
rightly.
had Joe Hart on loan as well.
And
Yeah.
I don't think many would have envisaged. I thought Birmingham then would do what like a Crystal Palace now and kind of establish themselves as a mid-table team. Obviously,
For a lot of
Blues got
times in the
relegated.
2000s, they were that yo-yo team.
Yeah.
West Brom up and down.
West Brom, yeah, absolutely. And then the last team I want to mention from this 2009-2010 season that currently isn't in the Premier League, Portsmouth.
That's
It's like whenever you think of the back in the day, it's always Portsmouth. You think of, they were finishing mid-tables constantly.
Very old. Very.
They won the League Cup as well. The
FA Cup.
FA Cup on the red now.
Yeah,
But that was another one where they just. sold
again.
the
They
players.
had players on these like astronomical wages, couldn't afford it.
I had to let
And
them
it-
go. So,
There's one more team as well that who have had, and we haven't actually mentioned them yet. They've weren't in the Premier League that season, if I remember rightly, but they've had such a weird decade, which is Newcastle United.
yeah,
They won the Championship that season, and obviously Newcastle United, it's too big of a team for the Championship, really.
yeah,
Uh,
especially with their millionaire billionaire owner Mike Ashley.
and well, once they come back up, you'd never expect them to go back.
Mm.
They went back down. So
Obviously, yeah.
Newcastle had in this decade 2 seasons in the Championship.
Obviously, it seems to be the thing with Newcastle that if they do go down, they do tend to like walk the Championship
Yeah.
and get themselves back up. But I think it's just if you'd have asked a Newcastle United fan in the 2000s that they'd just be scraping to
Yeah.
stay up in the Premier League, they probably would have laughed at you.
Just with
And-
obviously that one highlight this decade of the 11-12 season under Pardew when you had Kabay, Ben Arthur, Denver
Yeah.
Bar, Cisse firing on all cylinders.
Oh, those Cisse goals. I mean, Denver Bar. Can we not mention him, please?
Again, you look at the Newcastle team that got relegated in 15-16 under McLaren.
So they had
Wijnaldum, Sissoko,
Wijnaldum, who both went on to play in a Champions League.
and
final
then
together.
Florian Thauvin, who now gets in the France squad. It's
Yeah.
just again,
Mind-boggling to see that Newcastle have provided so many good players just
yeah.
not playing for them.
Yeah.
yeah. And when they got Benitez, you thought, this is it. Newcastle could make a push,
Yeah,
but then obviously it seemed like Mike Ashley doesn't want to give him.
it
The
seemed
money
like
that
they
he
were
wanted.
butting heads. Like Mike Ashley just didn't.
They just
Well,
seemed.
and
It just
then-
seemed so confrontational.
As Benitez left, he goes and gives Steve Bruce of all people 40 million on a striker, a lot of money on a winger, to not give Rafa Benitez a European Cup winning manager and everything.
But
Not give him the funds, but give Steve Bruce.
one thing I will say, I think Rafa Benitez wanted too much control.
Yeah.
For Mike Ashley's liking,
Yeah.
obviously Rafa Benitez having control is not a bad thing, but it's too much for Mike Ashley's liking. But it looks like Newcastle are going to see the decade out in the Premier League. I can't see them going out.
No.
And credit to Steve Bruce because he come in, no one really wanted him, and he's kind of just got his head down.
He's done a good job of it. He's taken this Newcastle team and he's trying to find.
He's made them
ways
hard
do
to
it.
beat.
Exactly.
You looked at the Leicester game this season and you thought, oh, wow, they're doomed.
Yeah.
But in all credit, that was a turning point. And yeah, they look like they're going to stay up.
I mean, you hope so for all Newcastle fans. I mean,
Yeah.
the other half of my family are Newcastle fans, so hoping for them. But if you were to name a top 3 of the decade, who would it be? Like, what teams would be in that top 3?
What, the best 3 teams?
Best 3 teams of this decade?
You've got to say this Liverpool team and this Manchester City team, haven't you?
Mhm.
And then another one. But I would actually say, so my top 3 would probably be Manchester City of the recent few years because they won the Premier
Yeah.
League.
Back to back with record points both seasons.
Yeah.
Liverpool currently, and
Mhm.
then a controversial one from me. Sam definitely won't agree with me, which is Chelsea of the 16-17 season,
Yeah.
which I think the way they won that league goes under the radar because up until this Manchester City-Liverpool dominance was a record, wasn't it?
I think it was too short of the record Mourinho set
Yeah.
in his first stint.
But yeah, Conte in that first season I thought was fantastic, and I would actually go as far as saying they were one of the best teams of the decade.
So Sam, what would your top 3 teams be?
I think it's obvious that you've got to go for the back-to-back City winning teams. And then you can't really look past this Liverpool team. They have won a European Cup,
Yeah.
but I think, as much as I don't really want to say, it probably has to be Chelsea. After
Oh.
that, I was split between that 14-15 or the 16-17.
Yeah.
Because that was your most Mourinho season, that first 14-15 one.
Yeah.
Because he just bored everyone to winning that league. Which
Yeah.
One team we haven't said though is Leicester of the 15-16
I was
season.
to say, me giving my top, the first name out of my mouth is going to be Leicester City. They have got to be.
Controversial opinion, that team was not as good as this current
No,
Leicester team.
absolutely not. But
I think they struck gold at a perfect time when United were in 3-4. Chelsea obviously had a disaster season. City was at the end of Pellegrini's reign. Liverpool was end of Rodgers, start of Klopp, so it wasn't a fully functioning Klopp team.
You can't take it away from them though. They won the Premier League when
Yeah,
they had
they
no
were
right.
fantastic.
It just came all together at the right time.
One, if we've got time,
Yeah.
one thing I'd like to throw out there to we all is manager of the decade. And I would like to pitch forward my suggestion, and I would actually say Jurgen Klopp.
I mean, he has got to, 3 Champions League finals within this decade?
3 champions. Yeah, because Dortmund.
Dortmund.
Forget about that.
I think, you look at Liverpool when he took over, and they had
2
Rodgers.
Bundesligas with Dortmund as well this decade.
Mm-hmm.
They had Rodgers, and Klopp took over, and we listed the signings he made last night, and you can only name one bad signing, and who was it?
Karius.
Loris Karius,
Yeah.
just for the fact that he did kind of cost them a European Cup. But other than that, I don't think Klopp's made a bad signing. Yes, Liverpool have spent money to get where they are now, but they've spent it so wisely.
Everyone spends money nowadays.
Yeah, it's part of the game now. You've got to spend money. It's a pay-to-win game, and it's horrible, but you've got to do it.
So for how he's turned Liverpool into the beast that they are, I would say my suggestion for manager of the decade is Jurgen Klopp.
Can't argue with that, to be honest. I mean, a bit of bias. I love Jurgen Klopp. I'm a Liverpool fan, so to have the caliber of Jurgen Klopp after so much trash, we started the decade. Roy Hodgson.
I think if there's ever a manager made for Liverpool, it was Jurgen Klopp. Like, even at his days at Dortmund, you could always see him.
It's the passion. It's the passion he admits at that working class club that was Dortmund, and he's come into this club, and he evokes so much emotion.
I mean, what he's made Anfield on European, especially knockout, like that semi-final against Barcelona.
No other club would have done to Barcelona what Liverpool did.
Especially to have 2 of your best 3 attackers, you have Salah and Firmino out for that semi-final, and to manage to overturn one of the best. Well, they have the best player of all time in their team, Barcelona.
So,
and to overturn that 3-0 deficit is.
It is a tactical. I mean, a lot of people would say Pep Guardiola, or maybe even Brendan Rodgers. At the minute,
Brendan Rodgers is a very good manager.
I mean, he had that very good season at Liverpool, and now he's having this fantastic season.
The thing is with Brendan Rodgers,
he was a slip away from winning the Premier League title.
The thing is with Brendan Rodgers, I think social media kind of duped everybody into thinking Brendan Rodgers was a really bad manager.
Yeah.
You've got the deluded Brendan Twitter account, and everyone got the impression that he was a bit of a clown. He's not. He's a brilliant coach, very good man manager as well. And the job he's done at Leicester, he went up to Scotland, and everyone thought anyone could win the league up there with Celtic.
But he just did, the way he did it, it was like no one else had ever done up there. No,
Rangers didn't get a sniff, and he come back down south, and look at the job he's doing at Leicester now.
Yeah,
amazing.
He's come into this Leicester side, one that didn't do too well last season. I mean, not to the caliber they are now. They have more points and more wins than what they did at that when they won the league that year.
That was a really weird season, though. Like, if you pull the table up from that season, it almost doesn't. It looks like something you'd see like on Football Manager.
Honestly,
in about 20 years' time.
Or if you take control of Leicester on FIFA, or something, you're rebuilding them. Like, yeah, absolutely. But no, absolutely not. Like, Leicester have been absolutely fantastic this season. Shows the tactical mastermind of Brendan Rodgers.
It might be a bit biased here, but I think Pochettino would have been a greater shout if he had if he had won something under his time at Spurs.
If he won that Champions League, absolutely, I would have given that to Pochettino.
But there was so many times during this decade that he should have won. Like I still think, not necessarily Leicester season. I think the Chelsea season, the Spurs should have won the league. But just a poor period of form in that season cost us a title where we lost Cade and all the time out of injury.
Yeah. So yeah.
And then there was obviously 2 FA Cups we should have won.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
We lost two semi-finals on the patch in the FA Cup, and obviously the final in Madrid that could have gone on another day, could have gone another way.
But yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone would have predicted where we are at this point.
No,
I think
it's a weird game, football.
Yeah, it is like, you know, a lot of politics involved as well, and obviously the influx of transfer markets and stuff. We could go forever on it, but
I mean, you know, look at
start of the decade. If you're saying
start of the decade,
someone's going to go for 200 million.
Exactly,
unthinkable.
A 20-year-old kid is going to be worth 20.
Well, at the start of the decade, if I'm right in saying, the record transfer was Robinho to Manchester City.
Ronaldo to
Madrid.
Madrid.
Yeah. I mean, incoming into England.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Robinho for Manchester City, 32.5 million. That's like, you know, Liverpool signed Wijnaldum for that.
You get nowadays, you just get an average Premier League player for that much.
Yeah, like Danny Drinkwater.
Yeah.
He's a poor player, and Chelsea paid that much for him, and now he's on loan at Burnley. They spat him out again. So, I think
if we come back in 10 years' time.
Oh,
well, if we're still at uni in 10 years' time, then something's gone drastically wrong. But if we come back, hypothetically speaking, if we come back in 10 years' time, there'll probably be more like moments that you'd never have thought.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, like you said, we could have Charlton Athletic winning the Premier League.
Exactly. Charlton Athletic could be signing Kylian Mbappe for 300 million, or even 500 million there.
Coventry could be in the Premier League.
The first £1 billion player could be in 2030. Let's be honest.
No, I'm daring to dream. We're going to come back in 10 years, and Coventry City will have made the Champions League. We'll have won the FA Cup.
The average pundits, 520th episode. We're gonna get that.
Yeah, Mark. If you're a betting man and you're listening, or a woman, sorry,
we don't have a large audience.
We
let's be honest.
are going to be in the Premier League come the end of the decade.
That is a bold prediction. Someone clip that. We're clipping that, and if
the Sky Blues are back on the rise.
Oh my god! And on that bombshell, to quote a famous BBC presenter, we're done.
We're done.
So
Romeo done.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing and liking, sharing with your friends, your goldfish, whatever. Please follow us on Twitter at Average Pundits on at Pundits Average. I get confused sometimes. I'm speaking too fast. At Pundits Average on Twitter and at Average Pundits on Instagram. And yeah. Thank you, Alex, for being on.
What a pleasure. Long-time lister, first-time contributor, and
brilliant.
It's an honour. Thank you for having me on.
It's an honour to have you.
Thanks for having me on again.
Oh, we'll always have you on, Sam. And you, Alex. We'll always have anyone that wants to come on as well. Please give us a message as well. We need football fans. We need football fans at the absolute best. And hopefully you guys enjoy our next episode. It's going to be a Christmas-themed episode. So please stay tuned to that. We shall see you and speak to you next time.